Warning. The podcast you are about to listen to contains incoherent rambling read to you by a middle-aged man who believes he is funnier than he actually is. Some listeners may find the amount of sarcasm and dry humor disturbing and traumatizing. Discretion is advised.
Who the hell is David Joy, and why should you care? If I just said that, hey, this guy's a great writer, and just go read everything that he wrote, that probably wouldn't make for a very long podcast. And it would be just about as interesting as watching, I don't know, The View. You can hop on Goodreads and do what I did and try to find a little bit more about the guy. So I started with his bio on Goodreads, and you could see all of the awards, accolades, nominations, et cetera, et cetera. You can even see all the books that he's written and probably judge the quality of his writing based solely on the average rating that his books carry. The more I looked at his bio on Goodreads, the more obvious that it didn't really describe the guy at all. So I wanted to paint a picture really quick and tell you about something that I've mentioned in some episodes in the past. And we have a book social here that meets periodically in the Louisville, Kentucky area. And back in November of 2023, we had the pleasure of meeting up at Third Turn Brewing for Noir at the Bar event. Now, there was 10 authors who were all given, I think, about 10 or, 15 minutes to read some of their work. And the place that we met up with, obviously, you're going to have Noir at the Bar at a bar, and they had all of these tables situated kind of in the front of the place and seats for the audience, and we're all facing all the tables, obviously, because we're going to sit there and we're going to see all of these authors. They're going to take turns getting up and read. And I remember sitting there, I was watching all of these authors talk before the event got started, and there was a little part of me that was jealous, knowing that I want to write a book now, and I'm trying to do that. I think what an honor it would have been to have been asked to do something like this. And I also need to admit that I did not know who any of these people were. I had not heard any of their names, and I had read none of their books. And this event, I think this is why it's great, right? It connects authors with readers. And I love finding new authors, especially ones where they become like an instant favorite. And anyway, I just love finding new authors almost as much as I would enjoy a day without my knees and back hurting. As the time came for authors to get up and start speaking, reading, everyone kind of got settled in. And I remember watching this pretty tall dude walk from the back, and I thought he was leaving. And this is going to come out really terrible, given that there's only 4 of you that listen to this. I don't think anybody's going to cancel me. But when I saw this guy walking up front, what I thought was, oh, I bet this dude got off work and he came in here for a beer. And when he saw all these book nerds, he was like, you know what? I'm out. But this guy walked up to the microphone and I thought, wait a minute. He doesn't look like an author. And when I first thought that, it made sense to me. But like saying it out loud now, I wonder, what does an author look like? Like, I don't know what I was expecting. Like, was he supposed to be wearing all black with glasses and long hair? Like, I don't even know what an author looks like. Everybody on this, I guess I'll call it a panel, but everybody that was there and reading, everybody looked entirely different. None of them, I would say, had a quote unquote author look. So I really don't know what I was expecting. But like I said, he looked like he just got done working like at a farm, and it caught me off guard. Now looking back on it, I feel crappy for having felt that way, but I just want to throw it out there. Just give you another reason to judge me, I guess. But if you're slow to keep up, this guy that got up there, obviously, his name is David Joy. And he began to read the first chapter of his book, The Line That Held Us. He started with a quiet joke about staying out past his bedtime. You know, everybody laughed at that. But I agreed. And it was just a source of like instant connection. And it really only took, I think it was like a sentence or two from his mouth before I was like, all right, that's all I need to hear. Just where is the book and who do I need to pay? The room was quiet. And I remember smiling because of how much I enjoyed what this guy was reading. He's from and writing about Appalachia, and I really hope I'm saying that right. Appalachia. I mean, why would I take the time to figure out how to say it? Why would I do that? I'm not even going to bother. So he carries a similar accent that made his reading, especially of his own work, more special, more powerful. And I knew instantly that I was going to read this book. It's kind of hard to pinpoint just exactly how I felt. It was just, I don't know, maybe starstruck, mesmerized, that whole kind of thing, except he wasn't giving off the crappy social influence or celebrity type vibe. He's just down to earth. I wrote this from the heart, and I'm going to read it to you. And the room was entirely focused on him reading. There's just a special and unique recipe of his voice, his words, his reading, his background, his knowledge, his pacing. It all came together quite perfectly. I didn't understand it at the time, but I later realized that after he read from his book, he quietly moved to the back of the room and pretty much disappeared. And from some of his posts online, I get the vibe that he's not one to frequently appear at events like this. I wanted to go buy his book and have him sign it. And I couldn't find the guy after the thing was over. It was like, hey, this is past my bedtime. I don't normally do this, but they asked me I'm going to come read, and then I'm out. The guy will be forever endeared to me because of those reasons. But knowing now that these events are not something that he, I think, normally seeks out, I was really thankful that he was there in the first place. I would not have had him on my radar. I don't think. I haven't seen some of the book clubs that I'm in online. I haven't seen a lot of his work recommended. So I guess in a way, that's why I kind of thought it would be important to put this out there in a podcast, because I loved his work, and I think you would too. So I picked up a copy of Those We Thought We Knew, but it would be a month or so before I would finally getting around to reading it. First book of David's that I read was Where All Light Tends to Go. This is set in the mountains of North Carolina. This book centers around a character named Jacob McNeely, whose father runs a meth ring. It's a harsh, sad, and often violent world that he describes. Here's a comparison that I'm pretty sure you weren't prepared for. In a way, the writing reminded me of reading Lolita. And I'm sure you're thinking, what in the hell are you doing comparing a guy that's writing about the mountains of North Carolina to something like Lolita? Very rarely do I have a valid point or purpose, but here's an occasion. What I mean by that is that the world that these authors create can oftentimes be terrible and dark, but it's hard to wrap your mind around the description and the beautiful writing that composes this. Like, the contrast is impossible for me to overlook. Obviously, if you know anything about Lolita, that's a dark and disturbing book, but the writing is so fantastic. And there's this contrast, and I battled with that through the whole book. Now, obviously, David Joy isn't writing something as dark, I would say, as Lolita, but he's not afraid to talk about dark or harsh worlds, and he doesn't shy away from difficult subjects either, but he does so in just a beautiful way. His writing, anytime you're like, I don't really want to go down this road, his writing keeps you there. And I think that's the only way that I can describe it. Jacob McNeely reconnects with a former love, Maggie, and you feel like, hey, here's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. There might be a way for him out of this world that he's been born into and trapped into, and there could be a happy ending in all of this. And the hard truth of what David writes is just that. Life is hard. Life is unfair. Anyway, after reading Where All Light Tends to Go, moved on to Those We Thought We Knew, followed by The Line That Held Us. And that was the book that he read a sample of at the book social. And then finally, I read When These Mountains Burn. And I think I actually read When These Mountains Burn in a single day. And this was only because we were on a long road trip, and my wife loves to drive and I love to read. So that's a really good combination. Those We Thought We Knew tackles race and brings in a unique mix of a young black artist from Atlanta who returns home to the North Carolina mountains. And if you read the synopsis and see the words "Still Standing Confederate Monument," I imagine some of you out there are saying, I don't need any more of this woke crap. Probably tired of hearing race or the Confederate monument debate, but you really need to give this book a chance. David doesn't shy away from these tough topics, but he handles them, again, like his writing, very beautifully. This book isn't solely about race, though. It's about crime. It's a mystery. It's a thriller. It's actually a conversation piece about what do we believe? What are the stereotypes that are here present with us? I found this review that resonated with me, and they said, there is no joy in this one. This borders on the fringe of reality, raw and real, close enough to make you uncomfortable, whether it's your own thoughts or the ones close around you. Racism hasn't gone away. It just sits quietly on the surface, not as easy to detect. But when push comes to shove, that ugliness becomes apparent. I thought that was great. One of the coolest things about doing some of this is like, I'll go pull reviews just to see what everybody else has kind of said. And every now and then I'll find somebody that should not be allowed to write a review ever. And then I'll find someone I thought, I couldn't have said it better. And I think this is one of those that I couldn't have said it better cases. And the other two books of David's that I read, When These Mountains Burn and The Line That Held Us, obviously both set Appalachia, don't come at me. And I read these two almost back to back. And when I did that, I was a little worried that the writing would kind of bleed over too much from one story to another. Like, would there be enough separation in these? Same author, somewhat of a same setting. And I didn't want it to feel like just one long book. Like I wanted two unique stories. There are similar themes carried through his work, but every one of these stories themselves remain unique and very much capable of standing on their own. Now, almost universally with reviews of David's books, you will find how much everyone loves the characters he creates, the difficult and often dark worlds that he writes about, and like I've said countless times, the beauty of the words he uses. There are people that understand his books deserve high praise, and there's people who are wrong. I imagine people that cannot give these books the rating they deserve are the same type of people who think all of Jake Paul's boxing matches are real. And despite growing up in South Georgia and not North Carolina like David, there's still a lot of things that are familiar with what he writes about, like a touch of Southern that only those who were raised in it will know and recognize. There were so many times where he described things and it just felt, it just felt like home. That part of his writing was extremely comforting to me. And I thought about doing some in-depth breakdown and review of every single David Joy book that I've read, but I don't want to take the time to do all that. The main goal with this episode in particular is to hopefully put you all on to a new author who you might not have heard of, or if you have heard of David but not read any of his books, give you just a little more insight and reasons as to why you actually should be reading the things that he's writing. And before I close this out, I want to give a quick plug to me. I'd like to give a shout out to me. Really want you to take a minute to go visit haveyoureadthispodcast.com. And I'm sure there's subscription buttons all over the place. It's free and it gives me warm fuzzies when people sign up. And unlike Zuckerberg, I don't sell or use any of your data. What I have been doing, though, is putting together an article for each episode with links that might have been mentioned, but also anything else I find relevant about the author. For example, I found some great interviews with David that not only cover some of his books, but more importantly, like his background, how he got into writing. There's one interview in particular where he speaks at length, and I thought, had I watched that interview before I saw him, I would have just been even more endeared to him and his writing. I just think it's really, really good stuff, and it's worth taking a moment to watch. Even if you're kind of like me sometimes where you're like, oh, I'm just going to skip through the interesting parts. Give it 5 to 10 minutes at least. You got that attention span, right? And also, if anybody out there attends an event with David and can get an autographed copy of The Line That Held Us or anything else and mail it to me, I will drive to the courthouse and have one of my children renamed after you. Until next time.
When the days grow shallow, there are only the memories, the stories that remain scattered like seed, the tales that bind us in this world. We can retell them, gather the remnants of souls that have exploded into the infinite, piece the shattered bits back to form, and breathe life into the ones we've loved and lost. As we stare into the oblivion and slowly fade from the familiar, those stories will be the faces that surround us, and the voices we hear when we too come to pass.